Judy Welty, named after her mother, was born on April 4, 1943 in Quanah, Texas, the daughter of a traveling farm worker. Although they barely knew one another, Judy would eventually speak of her mother as a full-blooded member of the non-existent Mesquite Apache tribe. The family fell apart after Judy's mother passed away from tuberculosis. Judy was only 2 years old when she lost the most significant person in her life. Two older siblings were placed for adoption, while Judy and her baby brother Robert were taken to live with their grandparents. From that point on, Judy's family life took a turn for the worse. After her father's second marriage, she was reunited with him in Roswell, New Mexico, where she was subjected to violence from both parents. She was beaten, starved, burned with cigarettes, and made to work slave hours around the house. At 14 years old, Judy's rage finally erupted, causing her to burn two of her stepbrothers with hot oil and attack her parents with her fists, feet, and anything else she could get her hands on. She was imprisoned among prostitutes for 60 days as a result of the incident. Judy chose reform school when the court asked if she was ready to return home. She continued attending Foothills High School, an Albuquerque-based girls' reformatory, until she graduated in 1959 at the age of 16. From that point on, she hated her family. "I wouldn't spit down his throat if his guts were on fire," she once stated about her brother Robert. In 1960, Judy returned to Roswell and worked as a nurse's assistant using the alias Anna Schultz. On March 30, 1961, she gave birth to an illegitimate son named Michael Schultz. Since then, she has declined to comment on reports that his father was a pilot at the local Air Force post. She married James Goodyear, another Air Force officer, on January 21, 1962. Their first child, James Jr., was born on January 16, 1966, 4 years later. In honor of the occasion, Judy's husband adopted Michael Schultz. In 1967, the family relocated to Orlando, Florida, and daughter Kimberly followed. Despite her husband's ongoing Air Force service, which would shortly include a tour of duty in Vietnam, Judy listed him as a co-owner when she launched the Conway Acres Child Care Center in Orlando a year later. When James Goodyear Sr. was taken to the U.S. Naval Hospital in Orlando, he had only been home from Southeast Asia for 3 months and was experiencing symptoms that staff doctors were never able to fully pinpoint. Judy waited quietly 5 days after his death on September 15, 1971, before cashing in his 3 life insurance policies. Judy received an additional $90,000 in fire insurance before the year ended due to an unintentional fire at her Orlando house. She was suffering loss after loss, but she didn't have to worry about finances. The new widow did not suffer from loneliness. In 1972, she relocated her family to Pensacola, and the following year, she was living with Bobby Joe, her new boyfriend. Michael, the first son of Judy, was causing his mother a lot of trouble at the school and receiving IQ scores that were in the dull normal range. He was unable to receive treatment in a military dependence residential facility due to James Goodyear's passing, but Judy managed to get an evaluation at the state hospital in 1974, placing her firstborn child in foster care with mental treatment included. In 1977, Bobby Morris invited Judy and her children to move to Trinidad, Colorado. After reclaiming Michael from foster care and staying in Pensacola long enough to obtain fire insurance from a second home, she relocated west with her family, eventually settling in Trinidad under the name Judias Morris. Bobby Joe Morris was transported to San Rafael Hospital on January 4, 1978, but on January 21 he was discharged to Judy's care because the physicians were unable to determine the source of his unexpected illness. He passed out at the dinner table 2 days later and was taken back to the hospital, where he passed away on January 28. Cardiac arrest and metabolic acidosis were the official causes of his death. Judy's financial account was significantly boosted in early February when she cashed 3 life insurance policies on Morris. From the beginning, Bobby Joe's family suspected murder, and Morris wasn't the only victim on their list. The discovery of a Florida man dead in a Bruton motel occurred in 1974 while Judy and Bobby Joe were in Bruton, Alabama, Morris's birthplace. After an anonymous call was identified as coming from a nearby payphone, authorities were able to locate the victim, who had been shot in the chest with a .22 caliber gun and had had his throat cut. Bobby Joe's mother heard Judy say to Bobby Joe when the news broke, "The son of a bitch shouldn't have come up here in the first place. He knew he would die if he came up here." Morris later shouted out, "Judy, we should never have done that terrible thing," as he was dying and ranting in madness. Meanwhile, Bruton police said they had no solid suspects in the case, had no fingerprints collected from the room, and no bullet was found in the body. In allegedly honoring her late spouse and supposedly Apache mother, Judias formally changed her last name and her children's last name to Buenoano, the Spanish equivalent of Goodyear, on May 3, 1978. The family returned to Pensacola a month later and moved into a house on Whisper Pine Drive in the Gulf Breeze suburbs. After dropping out of high school in his sophomore year, Michael Buenoano continued his academic decline. In June 1979, he enlisted in the Army and following basic training was assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia. He visited his mother in Florida on the way to his new job. On November 6, he arrived at Fort Benning, already exhibiting signs of base metal toxicity. The amount of arsenic in Michael's body was 7 times higher than usual, and there was nothing the Army doctors could do to stop its harmful effects. Michael's arms and lower legs had become so weak after 6 weeks of treatment that he was unable to walk or use his hands. When he eventually left the hospital, he was carrying 60 pounds of equipment, including braces and a prosthetic device on one arm. Michael, his mother, and his younger brother were canoeing on the East River close to Milton, Florida, on May 13, 1980, when their boat flipped. Michael drowned after sinking like a stone, while James and Judy, who were identified in news sources as Dr. Judias Buenoano, a clinical physician in Fort Walton, made it safely to land. The local authorities closed their files after accepting Judy's account of the tragedy, but Army investigators persevered and began their own evidence hunt on May 27. In mid-September, Michael's military life insurance finally paid out, totaling $20,000. When sheriff's deputies found 2 civilian life insurance policies on Michael, they started to investigate the case more thoroughly. Experts in handwriting speculated that Michael might have falsified his signature on the insurance applications. Without her oldest son, Judy continued to live her life to the fullest, dating Pensacola businessman John Gentry II, and she even opened a beauty parlor in Gulf Breeze. In order to impress Gentry, she made up a time in nursing school along with PhDs in psychology and biochemistry from the University of Alabama, and said she most recently served as the head of nursing at West Florida Hospital. Even though it was all nonsense, Gentry fell for it and fulfilled Judy's cravings for pricey presents, international champagne, and Caribbean trips. John and Judy bought life insurance policies for each other in October 1982. Judy then increased the coverage from $50,000 to $500,000 without Gentry's knowledge, and she paid the premium herself. By December, she began giving Gentry vitamin pills that made him feel lightheaded and caused him to throw up. Gentry was admitted to the hospital for 12 days starting on December 16 and said that his symptoms went away as soon as he stopped taking the vitamins. In spite of this, he was not suspicious enough to end his relationship with Judy in order to save himself. Gentry headed out an early dinner party on June 25, 1983, with the intention of getting some champagne for a meeting with Judy. Since Judy had informed him that she was expecting his child, they had a lot to celebrate. However, John's vehicle exploded when he turned the ignition key, so he never made it up to the liquor store. He was on the verge of death when trauma surgeons rushed him to the hospital and saved his life. On June 29, after learning of the victim's peculiar insurance position, police had their first opportunity to question Gentry. Gentry was shocked to learn that Dr. Buenoano's pregnancy was also a fabrication after a background check exposed the extensive inconsistencies in her most recent history. Judy had undergone surgical sterilization in 1975. Investigators also discovered that since November 1982, Judy had been informing friends about Gentry's severe sickness. Most recently, she had purchased tickets for a world cruise that would have included her and her kids, but not Gentry. John found it sufficient, and he handed police a number of the vitamin pills that Judy had given him back in 1982. Florida's state attorney declined to press charges of attempted murder, citing insufficient evidence to prosecute, despite analysis showing that they had contained paraformaldehyde, a toxin with no known medical uses. Local officers and federal officials inspected Judy's Gulf Breeze home on July 27 and found tape and wiring in her bedroom that appeared to be related to Gentry's vehicle bomb. James was arrested for drug possession and unlawful weapon possession when they discovered Mary Jane and a sawed-off shotgun in his room. Meanwhile, Judy was charged with attempted murder and taken into custody at her beauty parlor. By the middle of August, investigators had located the source of the dynamite used in the device and connected Judy to the Alabama buyer through phone records that revealed a dozen long-distance calls from her residence. On the accusation of attempted murder, Judy posted bail, but worse was to come. She was charged on January 11, 1984, with first-degree murder in connection with her son's death, along with grand theft for the insurance fraud. She had seizures and ended up in Santa Rosa Hospital under guard after being arrested that night. Arsenic was discovered in the remains of Bobby Joe Morris, who was exhumed on February 11. James Goodyear's exhumation on March 14, 1984, produced the same outcomes. 9 days after Judy's trial in the first murder case, that of Michael's, began on March 22, she was found guilty on all charges. She was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the first 25 years on June 6. Gerald Dossett, a late boyfriend who had been dead since 1980, had his body exhumed by Florida officials in July as part of another arsenic probe. However, no charges were brought in that case. James Buenoano was found not guilty on August 10 of attempting to murder James Gentry, but his mother would not have the same luck. In that instance, Judy's trial began on October 15 and lasted for 3 days. The jury debated for only 2 hours before convicting her, and her 12-year jail sentence was imposed in addition to her life sentence for killing Michael. On October 22, 1985, a year later, Judy was put on trial for killing her husband, James Goodyear. She denied any wrongdoing during the week-long trial, but the jurors weren't buying her version of events. On November 16, she was formally sentenced to death after being found guilty of her second charge of first-degree murder. Several counts of grand theft by insurance fraud were found against her. She was suspected of committing several arson crimes, again for insurance fraud objectives. She was confined to the Women's Execution Row in Broward Correctional Institution of the Florida Department of Corrections. She maintained her innocence while spending 13 years on Florida's Execution Row, writing letters and crocheting blankets and baby garments. I have eternal security, and I know that when I die, I will go straight to heaven and I will see Jesus. Religious circles did not sympathize with Buenoano. That might be due to the nature of her actions and the fact that she has never expressed regret. Kimberly Hawkins, Buenoano's daughter, maintains her faith in her mother's innocence in spite of the convictions, stating, "She worked a lot, but she always made time for us. She did things with us." According to Buenoano, she has been the target of defamation, assassination of character to make her into a vile monster. She further asserted that jurors have been influenced by fabricated evidence and maintained her innocence. She said that she would have found herself guilty if she were in the jurors' shoes. Buenoano was put to death in the Florida State Prison's electric chair on March 30, 1998. She had steamed broccoli, asparagus, tomato wedges, and strawberries for her last meal, along with hot tea and lemon. "No, sir," was Buenoano's response when asked whether she had any final remarks. The remains of Buenoano were cremated. She was Florida's first female execution since 1848. Since 1976, she was the first American woman to be electrocuted. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye-bye.